All right. Well, welcome to all. My name is Dominique Carrel. I'm the chair of Ukrainian Studies at the University of Ottawa. It's our great pleasure to greet you at, in a sense, the relaunch of the Danyliw Seminar, which has been going on for since 2005 for 15 years, and then we had a 2-year pause due to the COVID, because normally the seminar is in person. And of course, we haven't been able to hold in-person events here on uOttawa campus because of the extraordinary and horrible situation currently happening in Ukraine. We are launching then an online Danyliw Seminar webinar series featuring exclusively scholars from Ukraine or scholars who had been displaced from Ukraine since February 24th. And this is our first event. It found to be a unique, if not inspiring and moving event. And we have 5 distinguished guests from Ukraine. My colleagues will present them in a moment. But let me now cede the virtual floor to our funder, our dear friend, Mr. Andrew Danyliw from the Danyliw Foundation.
Thank you, Dominique. I just want to thank everybody for participating today. I know, as Dominique said, we're experiencing some very difficult times, and I'm just very grateful that we still have that sense of community and sense of working together to affect change, positive change in all aspects of Ukrainian life. You know, as I was thinking about today, I was reminded of the work that my father did. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with called the International Commission of Inquiry into the Famine in Ukraine. And in 1990, the commission released their final report. And I remember just from my childhood and my youth, my father's strong involvement in this. And it struck me as I was reading through parts of the final report about the nature of the evidence that was being gathered and presented to the commission. And I remember also in 1998, when the commission was meeting in New York City, I had the pleasure of driving 3 elderly Ukrainian eyewitnesses of the famine that were going to present evidence at the commission to the airport, and how important that responsibility was to them. And I think today also is an important day to establish our sort of responsibility to continue to work and under tremendously difficult circumstances to work and to affect some positive change. I know these catastrophic events that are occurring in our country, and the evidence gathering is substantially different than it was dating back to the 1930s. So I'm very hopeful that some really positive changes can be made, and in terms of prosecution of these atrocities. And you know, I spent a lot of time in my youth working on this stuff with my dad because it was a very important project to him, just to get acknowledgement and recognition that the famine actually occurred. And what we're having here is atrocities and crimes against humanity and war crimes that are being committed in real time and being documented in real time. So I'm grateful to all the people in Ukraine who are working to document these things, and I just want to thank and pay tribute to every Ukrainian citizen who's sacrificed and given their lives and lost their homes, and the Ukrainian diaspora also is banding together, and we, you know, through the foundation and through my family, and we're very grateful, and we really hope that we can continue this project of ours with the University of Ottawa and all the wonderful people we have working with Dominique and with the foundation and with the Danyliw Seminar. And I just want to express my sincere gratitude and pay tribute to everybody who's contributed in any possible way. Thank you, and I appreciate your participation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We will now cede the floor to my dear colleagues, Mayhill Fowler from Stetson University in Florida, and Daria Mattingly, Kyiv born Daria from University of Cambridge in the UK. They will be co-hosting the event. Daria and Mayhill.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everyone for being here with us today. Thank you to my Danyliw team, and thank you to all of the panelists who are giving their time and energy with us today to tell us about their experiences, their research, their thoughts, their analysis, what they're doing since February 24th. If it's okay with Daria, I think we can briefly introduce our panelists, very briefly. We've asked each of them to speak for about 8 minutes, and then we will collect what I'm sure will be a lot of questions, and we hope for a very rich discussion with this wonderful group of scholars. So, Daria, would you like me to briefly introduce the panelists?
Yes, and before you do, I would like to say that those panelists who would present in Russian and Ukrainian will provide simultaneous translation in the chat room. So if you want to follow them, just open the chat option on the right-hand side of your screen, and you will follow the subtitles.
Yes, and following up on that very quickly, actually, you yourselves cannot contribute to the chat, but you will be able to read translation in the chat. Questions that you have, please put in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So our group of scholars today, we have Marina Zelinska from Donetsk and then Mariupol University, a political scientist who is currently now in Kropyvnytskyi. We have Elena Muradyan from Kazan University in Kharkiv, the chair of the Department of Sociology, who is now in Poltava. We have Sofia Diak, the academic director of the Center for Urban History in Lviv and a scholar of post-war architects and rebuilding. We have Tanya Kalanichenko from Drahomanov University in Kyiv, a sociologist of religion. And finally, Yuri Chapaval, a scholar of Soviet Ukraine from the Institute of Ethnic and Political Studies in Kyiv, former resident of Bucha, now in Germany. So if it's all right with our panelists, we will start with our first presentation by Marina Zelinska. Thank you so much, Marina. Будь ласка.
Доброго дня. На жаль, у мене немає презентації, бо ноутбук залишився в намаганнях евакуюватися з Маріуполя. А перекладач це встигає? Мені робити паузи, так?
Встигаю.
Добре. знаєте, в 2014 році я була Мариною із Донецька. На жаль, у 2022 році я стала Мариною із Маріуполя. Знову залишилася без майна, без житла та без майбутнього. Кажуть, що в одну і ту ж річку не можна увійти двічі. Ну, як ви бачите, мені це вдалося. Для нас, для моїх студентів та університету, війна почалася не 24 лютого 2022 року, а у 2014 році. Коли ми були вимушені з колегами переїхати з окупованого Донецьку до вільного Маріуполя та відновлювати університет. Я маю на увазі Донецький державний університет управління, який наприкінці 2021 року став частиною Маріупольського державного університету. Нам було важко нашим студентам починати все з нуля. Не було приміщень, не було матеріально-технічної бази, навіть не було житла для викладачів та студентів. Але як нам буде зараз важко, мені навіть трудно уявити після цієї війни. Це сильна біль для моєї душі. Це величезний стрес для наших студентів. Адже велика кількість – це ті молоді люди, які тікали від окупаційної влади у Донецьку та поступали в українські університети, зокрема в університети Маріуполя. Щоб забезпечити собі гідне майбутнє, бути вільними, стати частиною європейських цінностей. На лекційних та семінарських заняттях з моєї дисципліни політичні інститути та процеси які ми зі студентами часто обговорювали, ми обговорювали, що ж таке громадянське суспільство, що таке демократія, що таке свобода. Ми обговорювали відсутність цих понять в політичній системі Росії. Яке безперспективне майбутнє буде в Росії без змін на краще? А ось зараз, у 21 столітті, ця жахлива орда без будь-яких ознак демократії намагається зруйнувати майбутнє. Майбутнє моє, майбутнє моїх батьків, майбутнє моїх талановитих студентів. Змусити жити нас так само, як живуть вони, існувати в диктатурі та славити єдину людину, яка позбавляє їх майбутнього. Проте ми так не вміємо і ми так не можемо жити. Думаю, що саме за це нас намагаються зараз вбити в Бучі, вбити в Маріуполі, вбити в Харкові, вбити в інших містах України. Знаєте, ми досі не можемо відновити зв'язок з багатьма своїми студентами. Є групи студентські, де зниклих є більшість студентів. Вони просто зникли в місті Маріуполь. Ми віримо в те, що вони в порядку, що вони зараз намагаються вижити в блокаді Маріуполя. Якщо казати про певний план дій, то зараз я бачу важливість не скільки навчальних занять, скільки більше психологічної та емоційної підтримки. Підтримки всіх, кому вдалося втекти, вижити, вибратися з оточеного російськими військами міста Маріуполь, студентами та моїм колегам. Їх зараз розкидано буквально по всьому світі. Ті, хто тікав від війни, опинилися в країнах Європи. Деяких примусово депортували до Росії. Дехто опинився на окупованих частинах Донбасу та Криму. Будемо проводити заняття онлайн. Будемо шукати шляхи до відновлення повноцінного навчального процесу. Будувати якийсь алгоритм для атестації студентів та видачі їм дипломів. Це досить важко збагнути, що робити далі. Адже ніхто немає чіткого плану, бо до такого не можна бути готовим. Є певна мета вижити, є віра в нашу перемогу. Дякую, у мене все. Якщо є питання, з радістю вам відповім.
Thank you so much, Marina. Thank you for your wonderful words, and our hearts go out to you and to all your students and colleagues. We will have all of the presentations, and then we will have a Q&A session, and we hope that there were many questions for you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for your supporting.
Thank you, absolutely. We will all rebuild Mariupol після перемоги, after the victory.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Elena Muradyan. Elena, please, thank you.
Hello to everyone. First of all, I would like to share my screen. I hope you can see it. Yes. First of all, thank you for invitation for this seminar. And it was very touchable first speech, and even I can't stop my heart beating to concentrate what I plan to say, because I'm a dean of the School of Sociology, one of the biggest university in Ukraine, Kropyvnytskyi National University. And I would like to say that, of course, our situation is not so crucial, is not so tragic in Mariupol. But I would like to say that not even single day we had since February 24, when we had white day, when we didn't have artillery or other kind of air shelling. And now you can see the main, and before telling you the story of these 40+ days of our life, I would like to show you what is going on with our university for these more than 1 month. Now you can see the main buildings of our university. You can see it almost doesn't have windows. More than 500 windows are destroyed, but we thinking we are lucky about this, because at least this is something. We have many buildings because university is quite big. We have almost 23,000 of students, around 5,000 people of academic staff. And in the first week of the war, we started to lose our university's buildings. Now you can see the central part of the buildings, and probably most of you familiar with these photos. This is actually the picture of the university buildings where I was studying when I was a student in 2004. This is School of Economy and Crisis Business Schools, and all the world saw how we just lose this building because of artillery shelling a few weeks ago. It's destroyed absolutely, and you can see it's impossible to continue to study there. It was too big faculty, internationally recognized, and now, of course, you can see that it's recognized, but from different sides. Also, we had very huge sport complex because for our students, it also was absolutely destroyed. Also, some living buildings, they are in that part of the city. It's almost central part of the city, also was damaged. Now you can see what we have in our sport complex. It's also impossible to be restored. And one of the biggest pain was our Central Scientific Library of Kyiv University, really historical buildings with a lot of rare books. And after the shelling in the other part of city center, we also had serious problems with this. But thanks to mayor of our city, who helped us to move some part of rare books for 100-200 years to mayor shelter places. Also, we had quite serious problems in some part of the city that we call local Mariupol, Petykhatki and Saltovka. I think also in many international many international journalists told that this is really something impossible. The really serious part of the city are almost destroyed, and in one part of the city there is Institute of Physics and Technology that's also lost a lot of quite important scientific information, techniques, and now how it looks like. From direct shelling you can see these signs. But of course, this is just buildings. As our rector says, it's okay, we just should be alive, and we can restore everything, we can rebuild everything. And our biggest worries was about dormitories, because when war started, we had more than 1,000 students who couldn't go away in the first days, be evacuated in the first day, and they stayed in dormitories. We had 8 dormitories that were used, and almost 5 dormitories are destroyed for now. And you can see it's also damaged quite seriously. Also, I do chronologically. We have one building's Public Administration Institute of Kyiv University. Also, that's how it looks like. And our practice for international students is practical place, because we have 4,500 of international students from different countries. And we had really big success, as we saw before, when half a year ago we have opened our university clinic for practical place for them. It's also now destroyed and we don't have it. And now about what are we doing, except just the watching what's going on with our buildings and our staff. Of course, the main things was our students and our staff. Even after 10 days of the war, more than 800 students still was in the dormitory. Just 200 of them were evacuated, and most of them had an idea and a hope that it will finish very fast. As you know, it didn't happen, and artillery sharing was more and more intensive. Usually students were staying on a metro places. As you know, we have quite huge metro, and a lot of metro stations now are some kind of bomb shelters for them. Also, they stayed in a dormitories in a basement places, and some of them are there. Also, we have so-called co-working place, Kyiv Student Hall, and they stay there even now. After 40 days, we have around 50 students who live in there. Mostly the students who are saying us that we don't want to be evacuated. We live these months in Lugansk and Donetsk. We are not going to move somewhere. All these days, all these weeks, we had really different problems. First weeks, we had, as soon as we didn't have specific logistics about food, about water, situation in Kharkiv was really hard and crucial. We had to ask international support, local support, financial support to provide food, to do some logistics, to buy some medicine. Also, we had problems even with transportation. And here our administration created some kind of humanitarian aid center. And we got just full trains of everything that we need for our students from different regions of this Ukraine. I think everyone knows that these tragic days really united the country, united different parts of this country, and we had really a lot of support. But there was a way to, in the first week, to solve all these problems just by local initiatives. That's why our teachers, not just from my faculty, this is my personal experience, but I'm sure it was in, I know it was from other schools and faculties also. Teachers from just their own homes, they stay in long lines in a few hours, sometimes after the shelling in supermarkets to get food, to deliver it to students by taxi. And we had a lot of stories like this. Time to time, we even use a proposal of help from people who have their private houses, who have some vegetables, they just send it to our students. And that's how we survived, I can say, on the second week of the war, because we didn't have so good logistic and so good enough for food, medicine, as you can see now nowadays in our Kyiv Student Hall. I can say that for now we propose our help, and we give our help not just students and some families of these students who live in one or local dormitories, to university dormitories, but also for those people who just lost their houses and who lived in that very dangerous part of the city. Really, a lot of people were evacuated in a different way. Some had more patients, some less patients. These days we have one more wave of evacuation because the situation near the Kharkiv becoming harder and harder. The main things that we are doing nowadays, it's online education. We have started it almost 2 weeks ago, and you know, I can say it was quite successful. We didn't expect that it will be so positively accepted by our students. I had like I don't know, 20-30 messages in the first days. We say like, thank you, we see the hope. That's mean we believe in future, they believe in future. And even we got some misinformation, some fake information that Kyiv University will be evacuated. What we started media campaign. Rector started just to say no. Kyiv University is the city center. This is the main university, and it will stay in Kharkiv. We are still there. We live in for 2 cities. Some part of the time we spent in Kharkiv, sometimes in Poltava is logistics center. Just to we moved here some part of our servers to be able to start this online education. We are doing a lot of efforts for academic mobility. Even from my faculty, when I have around 950 students, around 140 students now are abroad. And now you can see smiling face of those students who are on their way to Canada, to one of the university. 11 students got this proposal, and they were successful. Also in Finland, in Poland, in many European countries. Some of our staff are in different countries, so they managing to have this proposal for our students. University provided really serious psychological support, professional support, and School of Sociology provide some kind of program. We started to have it from first day of the war. We provided financial support, thanks to support from our different partners. We have alumni association, we have the financial support on that account, sometimes our private account. Doesn't matter what kind. That's the way our students get in our financial support. Humanitarian aid for those who are in Kharkiv still. Some people are saying that they are not going to be evacuated, they don't want to move, and they have problems. That's why, for example, from Poltava, every 2 days we send in something that these people need. Evacuation problems, and we're trying to solve it. Sometimes people who are staying in Kharkiv, or students who are staying in Kharkiv, they have relatives who need some special medical care. So now this is quite complicated cases. Sometimes they need ambulance, etc. That's what we provided. Communication with international students. We were surprisingly positive way that 90% of international students say that they will continue their online education. Most of this is from School of Medicine, but these 2 weeks show that they already pay for their education, and they have started to this. So that's really give us hope, because they believe in our future here. And regular monitoring. Every 2-3 days, we trying to see what kind of place of stay they have. We also have for now 3 students from full-time study that we don't have communication with them. We don't know. We know one of them is Mariupol. One of them are in Izum, also quite crucial place, and one of them was in a Kharkiv region. That's what we try to do, to find a different chance. And this is our routine. Let's say, because war became alive for us, it became quite negative, but routine. We try to inform everyone about what's going on at university. I will share this presentation, and you can see the official webpage where we can see videos, where we can see all information about what's going on. And I would like to finish with my simple gratitude and thanks for all kinds of supports, not just financial, not just humanitarian aid, but informational support. This is really quite important, that all world should know, that all world know this, and especially I'm grateful for this seminar and this invitation, and I'm ready to answer a question if I will have it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you. Our next presenter is Sofia Diak. Sofia.
Thank you very much for this invitation. Do you hear me? Yes, I think you do. Yeah, it's very hard to speak after first presentation. Marina, thank you so much for all your resilience and all what you do, and Elena for all your work. I have to say that I'm in Lviv, and this is a relatively safe place. It's a place where I do have a privilege of, staying in my place, working at my workplace. But as everybody's life changed, mine and of my institution did as well on February 24th. Lviv, as we know, became a refugee hub, and this is how we hear stories of people coming through, staying couple of days, couple of hours, couple of weeks in the city. And while hearing the story also, as we are aware as historians, there are so many stories we do not hear and we will not hear. And so the center is a very different institution than from the Karazin University. So it's a private research and a small place. We are a team of around 25 people, and we do research on city history. And one of our focuses is was actually and remains about cities in wars and recoveries. Where we focused mainly on World War II and World War I, and would never ever imagine that that could be something in the present. And urban heritage, something that you think about how to rethink, how to expand, and now we are, thinking how to engage and help in rescuing and acting on the and facing destruction, and then thinking about what can be done immediately and then later. And of course, what is the place of education? We do have some educational programs in public history. So on 21st of February, this couple of hours, couple of days, which was radically turning, and our first and immediate reaction is actually how you help. So we did something that is not what we usually do. We set up shelter. We do have some logistical experience from organizing conferences, but we just turned our conference and a coffee place. We have a cafe into a shelter. And up until now, it's a we have welcomed and hosted about 300 people from different places in Ukraine, different stories and life stories on their way somewhere. And it's a little bit of, so many institutions and initiatives are trying, what they can and helping. So of course, this is what brought stories of people to us, and professionally we were thinking, what can we do as historians? And we launched 4 projects. I will very briefly mention them and then stop on some. So web documentation, it's a Telegram. So Telegram became a very important medium. And what we are doing there as a part of our experience and our expertise is digital history. So it's archiving Telegram, which is a very ephemeral media. So some of the channels, we are right now archiving more than 200 channels in cooperation with people in different places in Ukraine. So some of the channels already are not operating. So that's one. Another is visual documentation, which is very hard because taking images is even suspicious for people who have press cards and press documentation. So what we do, we cooperate with press journalists and people with press accreditation and ask them to share, but we also ask people to share their private or personal, so you don't have to go outside of the building or be risking or be suspicious or whatever, causing any troubles. But you also have to think that war is not only about this, it's very much about destroyed buildings. It's about full with people, railway stations. And we just hear this terrible news today on a railway station being hit. But it's about daily changing apartments. It's about things that we notice, and because everything is changing. Diaries of War, it's an initiative of our colleague who also teaches at Ukrainian Catholic University. As Marina rightly said, the whole concept of teaching is very different. And Bogdan Shumilovich runs the students, around 60 students at Catholic University, but not only initiative or the format called Diaries of Wars, and basically, works with how we go through this experience and helping each other. Most challengingly, we started oral testimonies. As you know, there are war documentation of war crimes. This is a very different type of project. It's more oral history, so we focus on people. It's a very thin line, it's a long topic of how you balance methods and ethics. So the experience we rely on is communication with people who did documentation research on spot in war, like Sarajevo under siege, like in Aleppo, like in Iraq. And this also highlights in what kind of different geographies Ukraine is now, and also how world is a much more connected place. So thinking about documentation is also, as a historian, highlights what we were doing in particularly in relation to World War II, as we were preparing last year a project with a network where we are part of European Holocaust research infrastructure, and we were planning to focus on the histories of ghetto and look at the history of ghetto in Lviv. And what we are now shaping it is actually into conversation, how documentation, who documents. And we know that in World War II, documentation started in the midst of the most atrocious experiences. Like we have the Ringelblum archive in Warsaw Ghetto. We do have testimonies of Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw immediately after it was liberated from Nazi German occupation, and actually allows us to look into that sources back, and looking at these sources help us to find ourselves professionally and personally in Ukraine now. So personally, and that's my concluding, I do work, I am about to finish manuscript on post-war Lviv, a city which was not destroyed, but I was looking at the people who came out of war and trying to make Lviv into a new place. And that's, I can't stop by looking back into my sources, into my heroes, into my people I've been writing. The thinking about the future begins the second day the war begins. It's very hard to think. As you see, we are in the same war, but we are in very different places, of course, in many ways. So we know that in London, in Coventry, in Rotterdam, it took a couple of days, then discussions about rebuilding started. And of course, this is a big, challenge and chance here in Ukraine, because story of rebuilding and reconstruction is a story of, it's full of hope, to which people come very exhausted. This is what I learned, people come from wars exhausted, physically, if alive, and emotionally. And then, this, belief in a better place, a better society mobilizes people. But also, from what I learned from post-World War II, it also, the moment of solidarity gradually disappears, and there will be, different memories of different experiences and conversation, what somebody did or did not do during the war. So I think that's also something that, we probably are face to face soon. And thinking about now, it's about what kind of conversation, and most importantly, who will take place, who will participate in conversation about future, about post-war Ukraine, in terms of geographies, in terms of expertise, in terms of power, and participatory and emancipatory. I think that these are two things that I do hope very much that we will see when we will discuss and think about Ukraine in the future. And until then, we hold on and we fight and we stay together. So thank you for your solidarity and all your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you for this rich presentation and these many thoughts on not only the projects that the center is doing, but also the ways that your work on history refracts in the present, and the present refracts your work in history. So thank you so much. Our next speaker is Tanya Kalanichenko. Tanya, please.
Yeah, good afternoon to everyone, and it's an honor for me to speak, and I'm really grateful for all my colleagues who presented before. So greetings to you now from Kyiv region, because during the last year I actually moved from Kyiv to Kyiv region to Nemishaeva community. I would explain that you hear a lot about Bucha and Borodyanka today, so that's exactly in the middle of them. And our community stayed under occupation during all this time. So I would like to speak a little bit about my personal experience, because I'm not only academic scholar, but I'm also a peace building practitioner. Quite a hard job, I would say, in this time. But actually, my way of peace building started 8 years before, in the beginning of war, because for 8 years I'm working as a peace builder, as a dialogue facilitator and sociologist of religion during all the time. And war personally touched my family several times. And now again, we have it in our home, directly in our home. And actually, that's actually a documentary photo of one of our dialogue schools, so-called, because we were working after educating as a peace builder, being before only academic scholar, because it was not enough for me to do academic work, and I decided to get some practice. And actually, my main work during all these years was about connecting people, standing in a circle sometimes, because you see the people from different regions, from East and Western Ukraine, and connecting them and trying to teach them how to cooperate, how to think together about hard topics, about taboos. And especially you can see, as soon as I'm sociologist of religion, we had a mixed group of religious and secular people. And even in our work, we get before Ukrainian Russian dialogues a lot with youth representatives, with religious leaders, even with political leaders. And now it's really hard to understand what's going on. And we still keep in touch with some of them, and mostly all of them are under arrest. And I know that it's not an easy topic, especially as soon as we get more and more news, and especially for today, for Kramatorsk and other cities, of course. And actually here is one of the photo of our inter-Christian group of military chaplains, because military chaplains were those people who stand in the front line of war all the time. And that's a symbolic photo for me, because they're standing in one hug. And it wasn't possible to imagine before war starts 8 years before. And actually then war came, and one of the symbolic photos, which I really like from Kyiv, it's like a symbol of nowadays for me and the childhood and the ruined lives. And actually, I stayed personally 10 days under siege in nearby Kyiv without water, food, and everything. And that's our houses nearby, which were ruined totally. And actually, I'm calling those 10 days right now, like we get this practice called Vipassana. It's one of the most modern retreats when you go away for 10 days to think and to be silent. So it was my personal original Vipassana, I would say, and just to stay under the shelling and bombing and to think about your life. And I would like to say that nowadays it's a hard place to understand what can you do. And of course, as we hear a lot on Facebook and social media, you need to do what you can in your own place. And what to do, what you have done before, and what's your forces. So I've got back personally to my volunteer work as it was before in 2014, before the peace building and dialogue work, because of course it's not possible to think even about dialogue groups for now. But of course, we'll work more in psychological support and also talking with people, because after the siege, especially, it's impossible to understand how you can even talk. And for me, it was shocking to see that people are just moving on the streets freely and shops are still working and lives go on. And it's one of actually the key messages of even any kind of peace building and conflict transformation, according to John Paul Lederach, a well-known scholar in this topic, is that lives go on. And when we have the conflict, we need to think, what do we have next? And especially in terms of religion and sociology of religion in my field, it's actually one of the documentary photos of the ruined temple. And you can see that actually icons there, they're not ruined. And it's a special photo from one of the churches. So what do we have next? And how we can go on, how it's possible to live after all the news and after all the ruins and after all personal experience and pain, and what can be done. So as soon as you get this key question for us as scholars, I've just noted several points. So first, we should document, and you mentioned it before, and thanks to my colleague, because that would be forgotten in some days. And we need to document, make screenshots, get some videos and photos as soon as it's safe. And of course, check twice, 5 times, 10 times, and again, thousands of times, all the information, because we work in qualitative methods. So we collect witnesses, personal witnesses, and especially it's important when you get your personal experience to write it down, because you will forget it, unfortunately, in some time. And I know from my own experience of dealing with trauma and traumatized veterans and IDPs before, in 6 months, in 1 month, it will totally lost. So write, even if you think that it's common sense, it's not a common sense. That's your unique experience and you need to document it. And not only yours, but also if there are people that are ready to talk and that would be not re-traumatize them, then please talk to them and write it down. And it's another one of the photos of protector of Ukraine. I just said it because before in 2014 and 14, we get a lot of discussions and conflicts in the religious field, thinking about if it's possible to get an armor in your hands, and it's possible for the priest to be at war and other people, and how we do with believers, how God gets this down, and how it's possible even to get war in if you are a believer and to, for example, to be killed. So that's one of the pictures of today's reality, so-called St. Javelin. Of course, it's not about religion, but of course it's about hope and some signs for people what could be done. And we were thinking from our position, if as soon as we get this experience of dialogue work in different regions of Ukraine, what can be done? So first, we just started to document what do we have in the religious field and in secular field today, and to document all the witnesses, all the practices we got. And we do it mapping as soon as we do ongoing conflict analysis on a special platform together with international colleagues, because it's important to understand the experience. And I know that it's unique because we work with Bosnia, with Caucasus, with Libya, with Syria, and it should be done for comparative analysis in the future. And then second, as soon as we get a lot of connections in different regions of Ukraine, with local authorities, with business, with volunteers who came back from 2014, I think that's not a good tradition to meet each other only at war, but still we got it. And we created a special chat of coordination for interreligious cooperation. So, for example, if we're doing evacuation or we need to get some food or supplies, because personally I'm traveling to our Kyiv region and especially now for Bucha, Irpin and other communities, so trying to help. So we just collect this request, help each other and to understand what's going on and to help to make it more effective and constructive help. Then we did another part in stories and sharing stories and witnesses of what do we do. It's not only in academic world, but also in more like storytelling of our war, because I know that would be really, really important. And of course, there are some lessons learned, just a small piece, and about personal experience on what could be done and how it could be important for us to survive. So first, it's allow yourself to feel the pain and to cry and to understand and to get some pulses among news. Because when I'm driving, for example, to several communities, and we were in Makariv in the Kyiv region yesterday, so it's much more easier than to stay with a laptop and the phone for everyday coordinating and talking and hearing. And please take care of yourself. If you can sleep, sleep. If you cannot, get some medicine, get some specialists, because it's, for now, unfortunately, we get war to understand it, but I hope that other people shouldn't get war to understand that it's important to get a psychologist, it's important to get a therapy, it's important to get some medicine and antidepressive medicine if you need it. It's not a shame, it's important for you and for your relatives to get you in normal position. Do what you can in a special place and a special role, and to think about if, for example, I can only take some photos of flowers today and not to spread some fake news, that's enough. That's enough for you, and it's a good work for you to be done too. Find inner peace. It's a good phrase and it's used a lot, but of course we cannot sometimes understand what do we mean by that. And when we talked about with one of the priests with whom we are working, because we're working not only with Christians, with Muslim, of course, with Jewish, with atheists, and we get them in one group, and it's really important to discuss it, to talk and go on with it. So one of the priests just shared with me, we got some wishes of happiness, of love, of, I don't know, health, and some richness, but we do not get wishes about inner peace. And I think that's really important, because when you get your inner peace, even in this tragedy all around you, you can find it in yourself, and at least you will be in the stable position. And if you found it, please project on people around you. Please share it with the other people if it's possible to be done. And of course, sometimes it's not possible, and it's okay to feel different emotions. But I know from my work for these 8 years, especially as my husband, he is a veteran of Ukrainian army and he was injured. So I know that changes comes. And I know that it's possible to change. I know it's possible to live and life goes on, and we need to build our own new identity to understand our special place in this world and to understand how we can move forward. And as soon as we get this tremendous experience of pain, we should understand how we should go on. And that was one of the most beautiful pictures I found for today from Marta Pitchuk of Ukrainian women, because we get panelists almost all women today, and it's like a sign of inner peace and understanding that it's possible to transform. We cannot imagine for now how it should be done, and I cannot imagine to get Russian-Ukrainian dialogue even in future. But for today, I just wish for everyone to find inner peace and to support the work should be done and to talk with each other and to share if you can share, because it's really important. And thank you for this opportunity for me to share on this seminar too.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that beautiful presentation, that image, those words of hope and the ways that your scholarship and your personal interest and your personal experience are intertwined. Thank you so much for sharing. Our final presenter is Yuri Chapaval. Micro there.
Даша буде перекладати, я сподіваюся.
I will translate as Yuri speaks.
Мігіл, я піду за тими питаннями, які були окреслені в запрошенні.
Yuri will answer the questions that we as organizers asked him to address.
Я опинився серед дівчат, які багато розказали свого досвіду пережитого, і вже картина, певно, змальована.
Yeah, I found myself among the women who already described the context and painted the picture well.
Я почну з першої позиції, як ваші роботи допомогли вам зрозуміти цю війну, так була ця теза позначена.
So the first question was how my work helped me understand the war.
Мені доводилося неодноразово писати про Другу світову війну.
On many occasions, I wrote about the Second World War.
І зовсім нещодавно я написав статтю про спогади Федора Пігідо-Правобережного про початок Другої світової війни в Києві.
One of my recent articles was about the memoirs of
Правобережний.
Правобережний about the World War II.
І там були дуже важливі речі. Він писав про те, як поводилися люди, як поводилася влада, як поводився ворог, очевидний, однозначний ворог, який прийшов тоді на землю України.
Pigida Pravobережний wrote about important things, how people behaved, how authorities behaved, how the enemy or invaders behaved when they invaded the right bank Ukraine.
Там були надзвичайно цікаві епізоди, зокрема про те, що 23 і 24 червня влада в Києві наказала здати всі радіоприймачі людям.
There was a very peculiar episode in those memoirs that on the 23rd and 24th of June 1941, authorities in Kyiv asked all citizens to submit voluntarily radios.
І ця картина контрастує, звісно, з тим, що ми бачимо сьогодні, і контрастує з поведінкою влади.
And this is in very stark contrast with what is happening today and with the behavior with the reaction of the authorities today in Ukraine.
Та комуністична влада втікала, кидаючи людей на призволяще, просто злочинно втікала.
The authorities at the time were fleeing first and they were leaving people behind. That was a crime.
І ми бачимо зовсім іншу картину сьогодні, і ми бачимо сьогодні дуже важливу і просту річ. Сьогодні дуже важко приховати, замаскувати, викривити правду про ті злочини, які чиняться.
And the situation today is completely different. And also very important is to understand that it is very difficult to hide or to mask everything, your actions and actions of the authorities in particular.
Тому я залишаюсь, якщо можна так сказати, оптимістом і вірю в те, що злочинці, які принесли таку біду на нашу землю, вони неодмінно будуть покарані, на відміну від тієї злочинної влади, яка тоді, в 41-му році, втікала, а потім ще і репресувала, коли повернулася в Україну, тих людей, які пережили окупацію.
This is why I remain an optimist. And I also believe that the invaders that came and brought all this devastation to Ukraine today will be punished, unlike the authorities, the Soviet authorities back in during the Second World War, that not only were not punished, but they also came back and repressed the local population as well.
Друга теза, чи змусила війна переглянути ваші попередні роботи і дослідження?
Yeah, the second question was about how the war made me revise or reinterpret to readdress some of the issues in my previous works.
В цілому ні. Я думаю, що я не змінив своєї позиції.
Overall, no, I haven't changed my position.
Але ви знаєте, ці події і те, що довелося нам пережити з дружиною в ті страшні перші години і перші дні війни, вони мене раптом змусили задуматися, чи має історик право на моральні оцінки. Всі Даша перекладе.
Yes, but you know, these events, especially the first days, weeks of the war, especially everything myself and my wife had to live through, they made us ponder whether a historian, as a scholar, has the duty to give moral assessment of current events.
Існує такий постулат, що історик насамперед повинен зрозуміти і потім пояснити, чому сталося саме так.
There is a strong belief that historian has to understand and then to explain why it happened.
Але те, що ми бачимо, і те, що ми чули сьогодні вже на цьому нашому семінарі, очевидно, примушує думати і про етичну сторону того, що ми бачимо, думати про мораль, про моральні оцінки того, що ми бачимо, і того, що ми переживаємо, і, очевидно, ще приречені переживати.
But everything we've been through and everything we heard today at this seminar makes us think about ethical assessment of the events we are living through and those that we are to live through, that we will live through.
Наступна теза чи наступне запитання записано так: як історія, як дисципліна впливає на ваше усвідомлення цієї війни?
So the next third question out of 4 is how history as a discipline helps me to understand the current war.
Ви знаєте, я свого часу писав такі коментарі на статті Путіна про Другу світову війну.
Once I had to write comments or commentary on Putin's article on the Second World War.
І про одну з моїх публікацій дуже тепло відгукувався Пол Гобл, я пам'ятаю, він, значить, написав, так, реагував на цю мою публікацію.
Paul Goebel responded very warmly to one of my publications on the subject on Putin's.
В тій моїй публікації йшлося про критику і неприйняття тези Путіна про те, що Росія без України могла би виграти Другу світову війну.
I criticized and refuted the thesis statement of Putin that Russia would have won in the World War II without Ukraine's assistance.
І от тепер якимось фантасмагоричним, якимось дивним чином ми бачимо, що цього не могло бути. Росія без України, та Росія, яка була, ну, зрозуміло, ядром і в центрі Радянського Союзу, вона би не змогла виграти ту війну без українських солдатів, яких в Червоній армії було до 6 мільйонів.
And now we see in a phantasmagorical way that Russia, despite being the center, the core of the Russian Soviet war effort, it wouldn't have won the war without Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian troops that accounted for about 6 million of the personnel in the Red Army.
Ми бачимо, як воюють російські солдати і які цінності, яким цінностям, як вони мотивовані, яким цінностям вони, за які цінності вони борються, власне.
Yeah, we see how Russian soldiers are fighting and their morale and their values, how they are motivated to fight. We can see that now.
І якщо ми порівняємо цю ситуацію з вереснем 1939 року, коли Червона армія входила на приєднані землі Західної України, фактично землі Другої Речі Посполитої, і згадаємо, як вони поводилися, зокрема у Львові, що вони виробляли у Львові тоді, то ми побачимо дуже багато паралелей.
We will see the parallels when we'll look at the events of September 1939, when Soviet soldiers marched into the reunited or annexed lands of the Western Ukraine, or de facto it was Rzeczy Pospolitej lands, the lands of Rzecz Pospolita, Second Republic. So we can see many parallels between how they behaved themselves, Soviet soldiers in Western Ukraine in September 1939, and how they are behaving now, what they were doing in Lviv and Western Ukraine at the time, and what they're doing in Ukraine now.
А оці відеокартинки того, як російські солдати з Білорусі відправляють награбовані речі на Алтай, на Урал, там в інші регіони Росії, вони, знаєте, кого мені нагадали? Вони нагадали мені маршала Жукова, так званого маршала перемоги.
When you look at when you watch the videos of Russian soldiers in Belarus posting the looted valuables from Ukraine to their homes in Altai, Ural, and other places in Russia, they reminded me of Marshal Zhukov and how he behaved during World War II.
Я поясню, чому.
I will explain why.
Коли після війни за наказом Сталіна до маршала Жукова на дачу під Москвою прийшла спеціальна група спецслужби,
when Special Services Commission came to Marshal Zhukov's dacha near Moscow following the World War II, on the order by Stalin,
в одному з звітів цієї групи було буквально дослівно написано: така ілюзія,
was word for word, there was the following, the report said.
Така ілюзія, що ми знаходимося не під Москвою, а в Німеччині.
We are under illusion that we are not near Moscow, but in fact in Germany.
Тому що всі речі в будинку були абсолютно німецькими, тобто награбованими, вивезеними з Німеччини.
Because everything in Marshal Zhukov's dacha was from Germany, every single belonging, possession at the dacha.
Наприклад, в тому звіті написано було, що навіть було стільки картин, що не було їм місця, і деякі з них повісили на кухні, тому що не було місця на стінах, де їх вішати.
The report said that there were so many paintings, so many pictures on the walls that even the walls of the kitchen were covered with the paintings from Germany.
І я подумав, якщо маршал перемоги тоді, коли війна була з реальним противником, з реальним окупантом, а не з реальним нацизмом, а не вигаданим, поводився так, то оця здатність грабувати, не відчувати емпатії до людей, бути безжальними, вона закладена органічно в генах так званої Другої армії світу, російської армії.
And I thought to myself that even I thought to myself that if at the time when Soviet Union was fighting with real existing Nazism, and when Marshal Zhukov was allowing himself to loot and to behave like that, so this tendency now would be even more pronounced, to be merciless, to loot, to kill, and to just accumulate all of that. And it must be in the genes. This is how I'm trying to explain it to myself.
Ну і нарешті, коли починається війна, ми з вами абсолютно точно повинні розуміти, що першою жертвою будь-якої війни є правда.
And of course, when the war starts, we have to be honest with ourselves that the first victim of the war is the truth.
І навіть із того епізоду, який зараз став всесвітньо відомим, з епізоду в Бучі, а таких епізодів ще буде багато, судячи з усього, ми повинні розуміти, яка величезна відповідальність на тих, хто буде досліджувати ці злочини, хто буде, я кажу не про юристів в даному разі, я кажу про істориків, і яка відповідальність стоїть на тих людях, щоб донести до наступних поколінь і не забути про те, що сталося, і дотримуватися, бути чесним насамперед перед самим собою, і перед людьми, і перед тими жертвами, про яких доведеться писати.
And we have to consider the responsibility that lies ahead for the scholars and historians foremost that will study the atrocities in places like Bucha. And Bucha, now world famous, is not the last of massacres we're going to find out about. And also, apart from responsibility, these historians have to be really honest with themselves because they are going to tell the story of the victims.
І останнє зовсім коротко, як особистий наш досвід вписується в історію війни.
And the final question is how my personal experience of the war fits within my understanding of the war as a scholar. So personal versus scholar.
My and my wife. 22 лютого діти нас депортували в хорошому смислі на дачу.
Yeah, on the 22nd of February, my children decided that we should go to Dacha for safety.
І як перед цим я здав рукопис книжки про Олександра Довженка, видавництво.
Before that, I submitted my manuscript of the future book on Alexander Dovzhenko to the publishing house.
І рівно через 2 дні почалося те, що почалося.
And in 2 days, the war has started.
І Таня розповідала про Німішаєво і про той регіон, а ми опинилися, Таня, в самому, там посередині, між Бородянкою і, власне, Німішаєвим, Бучею. Ми були на дачі якраз там посередині, в Клавдієву. Тобто і над нами, для нас війна почалася з того, що ракети літали з обох боків. З одного боку українські, а з іншого боку російські. Ну, російські перші полетіли. І все це було над головою у нас.
Tanya has spoken about Nemeshayeva near Borodyanka and Bucha in the middle of it. And we found ourselves, our dacha is in Klavdieva, which is close to Bucha and between Bucha and Borodyanka. And we found ourselves in the first days that the rockets were flying just above our heads in both directions.
І потім зникла електрика, а у нас все було на електриці, тому стало холодно. Коротше, почалися всі атрибути цього зовсім іншого життя.
And then electricity was cut off and other things, and it was just all the attributes of the wartime came to the fore.
Я не хочу жалітися, але нам все-таки поталанило, тому що ми змогли 8 березня виїхати з того регіону, і вже російські танки підійшли буквально чи не того ж дня в цей бік. І наш досвід не такий жахливий, як досвід тих людей, хто залишився, тим більше тих, хто загинув. Але це було неймовірно тяжко переживати всі ці ночі і дні, коли ми не знали, чи лягаючи спати, чи ми прокинемось.
Yeah, I don't want to complain, but we are very lucky because we escaped in March just before the Russian tanks approached our place. But it was still difficult to go to bed every night, not knowing for sure you would wake up the following day.
І коли нас забрали, власне, підібрали на дорозі незнайомі люди, посадили в автомобіль, і ми поїхали в бік Житомира, ми побачили дуже багато з того, про що ми читали, або точніше, те, що ми чули по радіо, тому що не було не телебачення, а значить, в телефоні у дружини можна було слухати радіо.
And when we came to the road and the car with strangers picked us up kindly and we were driving towards Zhytomyr in the direction of Zhytomyr, we saw pretty much the scenes from what the news were to come. And my wife had a radio and we were listening to the news as well.
Ми проїжджали через російський блокпост, де бачили цих російських дуже молодих солдатів. Ми бачили трупи, які горіли. Ми бачили техніку, яку вони розмістили прямо в селі. Ми бачили руйнування в цьому селі. І багато-багато іншого, що несе війна і що стало тепер такою жахливою реальністю фактично по всій Україні.
My connection, Юрій Іванович, мій інтернет-зв'язок перервався. Повторіть, будь ласка.
Я говорив про те, що ми їхали через російський блокпост. Ми бачили російських солдатів. Ми бачили трупи, які горіли. Ми бачили наслідки бою. І ми бачили техніку, яку вони розміщали серед хат, серед мирних, таким чином, мирних жителів, свою техніку. І бачили їхню розбиту техніку. Тобто, ті всі реалії, які тепер ми бачимо майже по всій Україні.
So everything that we see in the news about the events in Ukraine, we've seen ourselves as we were passing through the Russian checkpoint and block point, and we saw the Russian troops, we saw bodies being burned, and we saw their tanks and between the houses positioned and abandoned military equipment, and we've seen everything that you see right now in the news about the atrocities.
Як тільки ми вже опинилися у безпеці, я дуже хотів про все це написати, але я вам чесно зізнаюся, що мені все ще не вистачає сил до кінця, щоб описати ті відчуття і те, що ми бачили, але я неодмінно це зроблю, обов'язково.
As soon as we got to safety, I really wanted to write down everything that I've seen and all my feelings, but I simply have no energy to do that, but I will certainly do it.
Я думаю, що те, що зроблено сьогодні на семінарі було, те, що ми почули, це теж важливі елементи, важливі штрихи до того портрету цієї війни, який неодмінно колись буде написаний і не буде забутий.
Everything we've heard so far at the seminar, these are the strokes in the painting that will be put together at some point about this war.
Дякую.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yuri. Thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists for these wonderful, thoughtful, and rich presentations. I do notice with shock that it is almost an hour and a half and the time of our seminar is running out. However, we will go a few minutes over for some questions and answers. There have been many comments in the Q&A thanking our panelists, asking for specific ways to help on their work and initiatives. So please do keep the questions coming. Just a few sort of quick remarks that maybe our panelists would want to comment on. I think one of the common themes we see is this issue of chronology. And so many of our panelists, right, Marina, Elena mentioned 2014, right? We know the war started in 2014, right? And sort of the ways that our understanding of chronology changes, right? In our current experience, this issue of geography, right? Not only sort of between Poltava and Kharkiv, right? Or sort of where people are displaced, but the new geographies that we heard about with Aleppo, right? With Sarajevo, making contacts and connections, putting Ukraine in a slightly different geography, right, than it's been in before. I was also thinking about the geography and chronology of the future, and what is so striking to me, I don't know for anyone else about these presentations, is talk of the future, the care towards students, the care towards the concept of the university, of teaching, of a future of peace, of what will the future look like, and thinking about that future and what that future is going to be. And the other sort of common thread among these presentations seems to be about testimony and documentation, and what it is to document, what it is to testify and to gather testimony, right? In a strange way, this seminar itself, for the recording, so many people have said, will there be a recording of this? Is in its own way a primary source, right? That historians will analyze. And it makes me reflect on what many of you just sort of said, the ways that our understanding of history of the past has sort of changed, right? Over the past month and 8 years, right? And the ways that we sort of interpret the past and understand dynamics in the past has changed because of our current experiences. And so those are some of my thoughts. I'm sure Daria can share some of her thoughts, and maybe we can gather some comments on that from the panelists if they'd like to contribute while we wait for questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'll be very short because there are already questions in Q&A section of the chat. So I would like to thank everyone, because you are sharing not only your scholarly perspective, but also your personal ones. And this is very powerful and emotional and moving at the same time. And my question is just for everyone in the panel is that, and I know that Yuri Chapaval already mentioned that you can put this war in a historical context, but for other panelists, just a few words, whether this war, which started in 2014 and now intensified in 2022, is that the war that you see as a logical outcome between this conflict between Russia and Ukraine? Or is it a war of Putin, as sometimes Western commentators say, that it's the war of one person? So I'd like you to ask for your interpretation of this war.
Would anyone like to tackle these questions?
Okay, I will try. You know, it's I mean, thank you, Daria, but that's a very tricky question, and we are in such a vulnerable and unstable place to. But you know, I can share that personally, my mind is flickering. You know, and I just like thinking how different optics can help me now, or can be possible in the future. To kind of to frame. I think that, you know, the one frame that is very important is that really war hasn't started on 24th of February. And as if you think about the Ukrainian-Russian war, we do have 8 years. But there are other chronologies and other geographies, partly we talked. You know, we do say Third World War. We actually do not know, because, you know, we might call it later. We actually do not know whether it will be, where we would have, I mean, literally Donetsk and Aleppo in one place, in one frame, and whether this frame will allow us to understand, because this is why we need these frames to understand, and each frame highlights only something. I mean, another frame is, of course, is, you know, like the Soviet Union collapse. It's about chronology. It's actually, are we seeing like, you know, brutal and violent dismantling of 20th century, or this is in a way which will shape the 21st century. So these are like chronological and geographically, I think that probably hard to say that it will be one lens or one frame. Mm-hmm. There will be a couple of them, and maybe some will be dominant, and probably will become dominant eventually, years after.
Neo-colonial as well, component in that as well.
You know, we do try to make some sense, of course, while being very much in the middle and in the midst, all of us, not only us in Ukraine.
Absolutely. Yeah, Tanya.
Yeah, we just add to Sofia just said, actually, if we talk about documenting, we are doing conflict mapping ongoing an analysis, and I would just add, maybe we should also on different tracks, of course, to collect cases, narratives, facts, for example, of ruining and other practices in everyday practices, and if not in terms in history, but in terms of sociology, these cases of understanding and narratives of identity, and also everyday practices, because it's really, really important. For example, when we're discussing why they stole carpets from Ukrainian homes, why they needed them at home, so that we need to understand what was through biography and everyday practices in culture and identity, why do they need them, for example. And also, of course, some cases and case studies of different projects, of different initiatives, of different stories, of different personalities, and case studies of scholars, what they are doing right now and how do they change. And of course, I would say that it's different identities sometimes in your head, that from the one hand, you're a scholar, and if you want to be in science and to make a objective study, then we need to be neutral as it's possible. Not maybe neutral, but multi-part and understand the different picture. Not to be a black and white, only good and bad, but to see all the shades of gray color at war. And of course, from the other side, we're persons, and we should express our personal feelings and personal experiences, as Yuri said, that we need to document our personal story, because it's really important too. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Elena, very quickly, there's a question for you about whether any of your students are going to Vancouver because they would like to help. And also, I know you wanted to share some of your own personal experience as well.
First, thank you. First question, it was about students. No, they were going to, let's say, Montreal. It's not Vancouver, yes, but anyway, if there is some proposal, maybe I can share it with my students. Okay, so I think we can get contact and see it. And thank you for proposal of help. And I was thinking how to answer your previous question. And for these 40 days, I realized that my personal much higher than my professional. I'm a sociologist. I can't. I'm not in political sociology. My field is quite different. I'm not political science studies, but still, as a sociologist, I need to have some opinion about this. It's quite complicated for me, same as Yuri said, because when I was sitting a few weeks ago, when I was sitting in my house, in my apartment, I had an idea that I will stay till last day in Kharkiv, and victory will come, etc. And first weeks, I was sure about it. Bombing didn't scare really much. You just all the time have rational explanation. But it was till the moment when that was shelling exactly in my house. When you are sitting in the night and you don't know, will you survive till morning or not? When you don't have electricity, water, things, and that time you forget everything. You just you just have your basic physical needs. Just run away, take someone and say in a safe place, someone that you can save, and that's it. And I see that few weeks, I'm a little bit in the same situation on my personal level. I can't switch on as sociologist. I have my lectures, but it doesn't connect to this topic. I do management of my quite big faculty. I do psychological support for my staff, but I don't know when I will be able to switch on my professional side of sociologist. I can't find rational or any kind of explanation what's going on. I was of those people who didn't expect that war, not on 23rd. And if some people said that they were ready, I wasn't ready. I didn't know that it can happen in 21st centuries in my city or in my, and etc. I'm sure you can hear thousand same stories. It just paralyzed us. It's paralyzed our rationality. It's paralyzed our emotional side. Thank you to Tatiana, because she mentioned something really important to everyone. And maybe I should share it with my staff. It's not a shame to try to find something nice. It's what's going on in everyday life. Try to concentrate on it. It's quite complicated, but it's still okay. When you move to safe place, first day, second day, 3, 4, 5 days, depends on how long you stay, for example, in Kharkiv, you just can't be okay. On the 6 days, everything becoming better. But that's what I see when my staff are moving to the same day, they have absolutely serious psychological crisis. So what I'm saying, these kind of questions are not very effective for us for now. That's what I see. We are, at least for someone who stayed on that hot local points for a long time. And I think sometimes even 1 day is a quite serious time. I can say that we are not able to analyze everything from our professional rational side. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that's really important what you just said, and the sort of question of how to be a scholar in a time of war, right? I think that's a very, very difficult question. I'm not even in Ukraine. I'm just a scholar of Ukraine, and I'm struggling myself, right? So I think this is a really, really important conversation to be having. One of the questions, just grouping a couple in the chat, are about, one question is about, what do you think are vital guidelines Western scholars should bear in mind when discussing the war or planning events, and when interacting with Ukrainian colleagues, particularly being mindful of trauma? And a more specific question is about supporting a proposition to boycott the Russian Academy of Science, including Russian historians, by the international community. So sort of a question about how people in the West should respond. Anyone, just jump in.
You know, it's just everyone's personal responsibility how you can do it. I don't think that I should say to some of my colleagues, you did boycott something or someone, because we have some Russian scientists who very openly in media tell their position, etc. That's one story. And there is another story who signed, for example, that's letter of support of Ukraine, some rector university, Russian rector university. That's absolutely different stories. Someone who playing this silent game, this is short form. That's all world know everything what is going on, more or less. And if you don't react, if you're in social science, it doesn't matter if you study mathematics or it doesn't matter. It's impossible to be neutral in this situation. It's just impossible. And maybe sometimes it's time to see just black and white, to say yes or no. You understand it as a war, or you understand it as a conflict or special operation, etc. etc. That's different. And I think you should start from this question. Is person or group of scientists see it as a war? For me, I can at least have some dialogue. If no, we are from absolutely different planets. Absolutely, that's the first issue that I can say, and that's all responsibility and personal choice of everyone.
Я скажу, можна пару слів?
Yes, Daria will translate. Yes.
Я нагадаю статтю, початок статті нашого історика зі Львова, який живе у Львові, і мій добрий приятель Ярослав Грицак.
I'll start with the article of by Yaroslav Gritsak, my dear friend in Lviv, Ukrainian historian.
Він написав статтю для журналу Time.
He wrote this article for the magazine Time magazine.
І ця стаття починається з того, що з початком війни жоден російський історик не написав до нього і не висловив якогось співчуття.
He started his article by saying that not a single Russian historian has reached out to him to check if he was okay or express any empathy.
Ну і там Ярослав Грицак іронізує. Він каже: "Ну, добрий історик, історія пов'язана з політикою, Бог з ним."
Yeah, Yaroslav Gritsak is being ironic about it, saying, okay, history is always politicized, so I understand why they haven't reached out.
Але фізик, російський фізик, з яким він приятелював багато років, так само навіть не відгукнувся на те, що почалося, і те, що те, що означає війна, оголошена війна Путіним проти України.
Yet a Russian physicist, theoretical physicist, who he has been in contact with for many, many years, also hasn't reached out to him when the war started.
І Ярослав запитує, ну добре, там з політикою, але фізик, при чому тут фізика, яка є аполітичною наукою, і тим не менш, значить, цей його приятель ніяк не відрефлексував на цю біду, на цю трагедію, яка прийшла в Україну.
So, and Yaroslav Hrytsak asks a question. Okay, history is politicized, so there is politics about history, but why a physicist hasn't reached out?
Віктор Анатолійович Шендерович, якого я страшенно люблю і поважаю, один з найзнаменитіших російських опозиціонерів і інтелектуалів.
One of the prominent Russian opposition intellectuals, Viktor Shenderovich, whom Yuri Chapaval respects and reads his commentary on the war.
Він сказав, що заложниками Путіна став увесь російський народ.
Shenderovich said that the whole Russian people, all of them became hostages to Putin.
З моєї точки зору, це фальшива теза.
But I believe this thesis is false.
Тому що російське суспільство підтримувало Путіна упродовж 22 років, воно його випликало, воно його виховало, і воно його дотепер тримає при владі. А значить, з провини конкретних людей, дуже конкретних, з іменами, прізвищами, складається оця колективна провина цілого російського суспільства за те, що трапилось.
Russian society has supported Putin for the last 22 years, and there is a number of names, and we are talking about specific people who are responsible and who bear collective guilt for bringing Putin into power and maintaining his regime.
І мені здається, що якщо російське суспільство не усвідомить оцю свою провину, і в першу чергу інтелектуали, які там є різні люди, які говорили, які щось писали, але якщо суспільство в цілому не усвідомить цю провину, ми приречені на те, що буде повторюватися оцей імперський рецидив. Він так просто в історію не піде.
And I believe that if Russian society does not reflect and reject this imperial episode in its history, it is going to repeat. And in Russian intellectuals foremost, because they were writing and they were substantiating this regime, neo-imperial discourse. And it's not going to just leave history, it will come back.
І тому мені здається, що всі російські структури, хіба що за винятком Московського меморіалу, який справді вів боротьбу до останньої хвилини, вони повинні відчути, що трапилось, відчути до кінця і нікого не оголошувати наперед заложниками, там, жертвами. Тут треба визнати цю провину і далі думати, як жити далі, що робити далі, як будувати стосунки з Україною.
Therefore, all Russian institutions, they are implicit. In fact, they are complicit in this, and they share this collective guilt. All Russian institutions, with the exception of Memorial, who was a hostage. Otherwise, there is no way forward. They have to understand and then to work out the way to move forward.
Great. So I think Sophia wanted to add something on this.
I just very quickly, I try, it's about like being aware of your position of power and privilege, but it's mansplaining or mansplaining, or maybe in the future women's planning. We don't know, but I think it's really important now from what I see, which is like to pause, to really pause and listen and think, and just don't take your once granted words, procedures, regulations. And I think that, clearly West is in a position of privilege, not in this war, but in generally. And here it would be like with all the, for example, if we can speak about academic help, but also I'm thinking about some of the initiatives that start about rebuilding Ukraine, which I'm more aware of, that we actually are really open not only to those who, like me, are very much Western connected, speaking English, and, but also that we, including myself, I really think when we speak, whose voice is unheard, and then take a pause and look for that voice and bring that voice up. And the more voices we bring, the better, the more humane world we will be building. But we will basically have to get out of our privileged and learned and comfortable routines, me included.
I hope we can all do that. Tanya, and then we will turn for our final words to Marina. Якщо ви хочете щось додати, будь ласка, if you'd like to add something, and then we will bring this wonderful seminar to a close. Tanya.
Yeah, 5 seconds, thanks. We had a dilemma this year. As soon as we get our international workshop on lived religion, together with Professor Catherine Warner, we get it with Russian colleagues till 2014 as a principal position. And for this year, we should have it in Tbilisi in June. I don't know, is it still possible for us or no, but we will go on. And she asked me, so should I invite Russians as soon as they escape the siege and we get connection? And I said, of course, because we should hear and get this possibility to dialogue. Of course, if we see some scholars who are not dealing like scholars and fighting like with political positions, that wouldn't be possible for them to be there. But anyway, we should, as soon as possible, to not to be in one position of the victim or aggressor and to change them, we should get this space to talk, if it's still possible, on scientific mode, because I cannot explain it and see it and expect in volunteer mode in humanitarian aid today. So yes, and I hope it would be possible, and I hope it would be good to share and also to hear different positions. Thanks.
Thank you. Marino, будь ласка.
Так, я хочу додати, що коли почалася війна, у нас були певні надії, що через тиждень-два російський народ прокинеться нарешті, побачить той жах, який вони створили своїми власними руками.
When the war started, many of us had hoped that in a couple of days, Russian people will see all the horror they had inflicted on Ukraine, and they would wake up.
В українському суспільстві дійсно була велика надія на те, що буде переворот, який змусить Путіна піти всю його команду, що саме народ Росії змінить своє майбутнє і наше майбутнє також.
There was a hope in Ukrainian society that Putin's regime would be toppled, there would be a coup, and the change in Russia would come from within, hence helping Ukrainian people as well as Russian people to finish this horrible episode.
Але, на жаль, російський народ є невиліковно хворим.
However, Russian people are incurably ill.
Пропаганда, яка дійсно тривала майже 20 років, вона дала свої плоди, і ми це бачимо. Ми бачимо ці плоди, які ми пожинаємо в Україні.
Yeah, we can see the results of propaganda that lasted over 20 years, and we can see these results, and we have to bear them in Ukraine. We facing these repercussions of propaganda.
Сьогодні, коли сталася трагедія у Краматорську, якщо хтось не знає, влучили 2 ракети, близько 40 людей загинули, більше 100 людей отримали поранення.
There was a rocket that hit a train station in Kramatorsk today. For those of you who haven't followed the news, 39, almost 40 people died as a result, and up to 100 were injured.
Щоб ви розуміли, це ті люди, які намагалися евакуюватися після того, як було оголошено, що Донецька та Луганська область стають небезпечними, бо Путін буде зосереджуватися саме на цих областях.
Yeah, and just to be clear, those people affected by this attack, they were at the train station trying to evacuate following the announcement by Ukrainian authorities to leave as soon as possible these areas because this is where Russians would attack.
Я зайшла в російські пабліки і почитала коментарі до цієї події.
And I went on social media to check Russian audience, how they responded to this event.
Так ось ці невеликовно хворі люди, вони раділи цієї трагедії. Вони писали «Слава Росії», «Так, їх давити» і інше.
The overwhelming majority of the commentators commented that it is glory to Russia and Ukrainians should be destroyed. And they were rejoicing at the news.
Знаєте, після трагедії Маріуполя, після того, що ми всі бачили в Бучі, вони кажуть, що це фейки, цей лозунг підтримує російське суспільство, і це досить жахливо, і я не знаю, як з цим боротися, і немає в мене слів взагалі немає слів, бо ми це не зможемо переламити, якщо не будемо їх просто вбивати у відповідь.
I am lost for words. Words just fail me because after the tragedy in Mariupol, after the atrocities of Bucha, which they call fakes, we have no other choice but to defend ourselves by waging a war on them.
Там дійсно є інтелігенція, але, на жаль, я зараз спостерігаю, що навіть вони виявилися невеликоно хворими цією пропагандою. Якщо є 5-10% адекватних росіян, то це буде дуже добре.
Yes, so I believe that if there is 10% or 15% of Russians that actually do not support war, that would be good. But even the intellectuals, they have been affected by propaganda and they are ill. They are ill, incurably ill with that propaganda.
Якщо казати про українське суспільство, то Маріуполь був досить неоднорідний у своїх політичних поглядах.
Mariupol was, when we talk about Ukrainian society, Mariupol was very diverse in its political views.
Тобто так, там, звичайно, був відсоток людей, які підтримували і Росію, і так звані ЛНР і ДНР, і заздрили нам з приводу того, у вас 2 пенсії ви можете отримувати в Донецьку та Маріуполі.
Of course, there was a number of people in Mariupol who were very envious about our situation as refugee status of refugees from Donetsk, because we were receiving pensions both from Donetsk and Ukrainian Mariupol, but also they showed a loyalty to the self-proclaimed republics of LNR, DNR, and Russia. There were people like that. There was a percentage of them.
Але після того, як Росія напала на нас, після того, як почали бомбити Маріуполь, квітуче місто, зовсім успішно процвітаюче місто, вони майже знищили. І я зрозуміла, що навіть ті, хто підтримував Росію, після такого кроку, вони зовсім поміняли свою думку. Тобто вони почали розуміти, хто їх бомбить насправді.
Yeah, but most of those people who showed those loyalties understood who is actually the enemy after Russia invaded, after Russia started bombing Mariupol, once a very thriving and developing city, and they suddenly realized what the situation was actually and is.
Знаєте, я дуже радію тому, що наше українське суспільство зараз стало єдиним в усьому, в політичних поглядах, в будь-яких поглядах ми стали єдиним. Це, боляче, що це через такий шлях прийшло до нас, але це просто супер, як на мене.
It pains me to say that at a very high cost, Ukrainian society has been mobilized and it's united. It's united in its effort and political views, and it's been united like never before, but at a very high cost.
І здебільшого, знаєте, Росії, її війська взагалі не потрібні. Ось Юрій розповідав, як він їхав, як горіли росіяни. Ми теж виїхали з Маріуполя і бачили чисельні трупи росіян, які просто валяються на дорозі, і вони нікому не потрібні. Їх навіть ніхто не забирає.
Russia doesn't need its people, its troops, because as Yuri was saying, as he was passing through the Russian checkpoints and there were abandoned tanks, Russian equipment, as Marina was leaving Mariupol, they saw also many Russian troops, the corpses, the bodies of Russian troops, dead Russian soldiers on the road, and nobody was collecting them, nobody cared about them. So Russia doesn't need and doesn't care about its troops sent to Ukraine.
Ось цього, мабуть, і є головна різниця між Україною та Росією. Ми намагаємося битися за кожне життя.
The value of
за кожне життя дитини, за кожне життя людини, а вони кидають своїх просто на дорозі.
Because we care about our people, we mourn people who are dead because of this war, every single person, a child, and they don't care about their people, they just leave them by the road dead.
Thank you so much. I'm just gonna, I see Dominique here on the screen in person, and I know that we've gone way over the time limit for our seminar. I want to thank everybody who's still with us for being with us, and thank you so much to our panelists for staying over. I think that the questions and conversation and points that you have made are very important. So thank you so much for staying, and we will turn the floor over to Dominique for final words.
I don't know if Andrew also can join us, Andrew Danyliw from the foundation. We just got, we had a lot of testimonies, very moving testimonies today, and we talked about testimonies, collecting testimonies. Well, I just got one from a viewer, testimony of the event, a Holocaust scholar in the West, in an American university. Dear colleagues, I just wanted to say thank you for organizing such a marvelous, powerful, and important webinar. I've attended several events since the beginning of the war, but I found this one different, special, extraordinary. The speaker's words will stay with me. So before I get too emotional, I'll leave it to Andrew for the final word.
Thank you, Dominique, and thank you for everybody for their sharing their thoughts and experiences. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the experiences I had as a young boy working with my dad on the commission of inquiry into the famine in Ukraine. It's something that's very part of my growing up and part of my sense of being Ukrainian and the importance of history. And I heard a lot of really fantastic and inspirational words today. People like yourselves, our esteemed panelists, and everybody else living through these atrocities that are occurring in Ukraine. I encourage everybody to continue working in documenting and making real these experiences, because it's going to make a difference, and we are going to make a difference. And I look forward to working with Dominique and all of you all into the future to continue these conversations and to affect change and make differences in the lives of Ukrainians and people all over the world, because this is not a uniquely Ukrainian phenomenon. We're talking about democratic principles of freedom and basic human rights, and the discussions are going to be long and deep into the coming months and years, I'm sure. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everybody's participation. It's nice to see some familiar faces, and I look forward to working together with Dominique and everybody else to keep the dialogues happening. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is meant, of course, to be an ongoing seminar series, Danyliw online seminar series, Ukrainian scholars in times of war. So there'll be more events to be announced soon. Thanks to all, thanks to our distinguished panelists, Daria and Mehil, and the rest of the team, and Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Bye-bye, everybody.